Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Categorically Romance podcast. My name is Bree, and I am so excited for the author that is joining me today. I have been a fan of her books since the very beginning. Author Kerry Winfrey is on with me today. Thank you so much for being here, Kerry.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Let's start off with tell us a little bit about you. Tell us about yourself.
Okay. I live in Columbus, Ohio. I set all of my books in Ohio, so it's probably pretty clear that I live here if you've read anything I've written. I am married to my husband Hollis. We met in college. I have one son who's 7 years old, and I have two dogs. And other than that, I am a pretty boring person, honestly. I write and I read and I bake a lot, I cook a lot, and I'm learning how to knit. I love learning crafty hobbies, but other than that,
Mhm.
I'm basically like an elderly woman in all of my interests.
How is that going? Because I've wanted to learn either to knit. Like I used to have an aunt that crocheted when she was alive, and all of us are now kicking ourselves like, "Why didn't we ask her to teach us?" But we were, like, little, and now
Yeah.
it's just like, you wanna have something to do, and I think I'm intimidated, like, "I'm 36. Could I really learn to do this now?"
Well, yes, because I'm 37 and I just took a knitting class. I
Okay.
actually took a class in person because I knew how to crochet from when I was younger, but knitting was very hard for me to learn. I kept trying to learn on my own and I could not do it. But I took a class and that was kind of like the thing that helped me out, having someone there to fix all my mistakes. So yeah, I think you can do it. I'm going to encourage you. If I
Thank
can
you.
do it at
Okay.
37, you can do it at 36.
'Cause I just feel like that would be, like, perfect activity to do while listening to an audiobook.
Absolutely. I mean, that's why I wanted to learn. I want something to do while watching a movie or listening to an audiobook, definitely.
Well, let's do some, like, rapid fire icebreaker, so whatever comes to mind first, just go with that. If you came with a warning label, what would it say?
Oh, caution, may start crying.
Oh gosh, same. Okay, are you, like, an easy crier?
I cry. Oh, I love crying. If I have a book or a movie that will make me cry, I'm so happy. I cry at commercials, just thinking about
Same.
emotional things. Yeah. I love it though.
Isn't
It's
it?
nice to have an emotional outlet.
Yeah, like, I will be in the car, and I think even, stories that I might make up in my mind can make me cry, and I'm like, "What does this say about me?" But I'm also just like, "You know what? It's okay, I think, to be a crier."
I think so too.
Who would you say is one of your most read authors?
Ooh, that is a good question. I'm gonna say I'm trying to figure out if I should go from, childhood or adulthood. I would say in
Mhm.
adulthood, I'm gonna be really basic and say Emily Henry. I always read the new
Oh,
Emily Henry when it comes out, but I know, so does everybody, but that's my honest answer.
I think that's okay. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, that's okay. Um, tell us okay, thinking of childhood, what
Mhm.
was your, like, childhood reading aesthetic? Like, what were you into?
Oh gosh. Well, I would read anything that I could get my hands on, but, the thing I started with was American Girl books. I was a
Oh,
Molly
yeah.
girl. I loved them
Yeah.
all, but Molly was my favorite. I
Oh
loved
my
learning
goodness.
about history. Yeah, those are my faves.
I always wonder, like, girls now at that age, like, what I feel like now we actually have middle grade, I don't really know. I feel like when
Mhm.
we were kids, it wasn't, like, middle grade, it wasn't YA. You just went to the kids section
Yeah.
of the bookstore, but I'm like, what's coming out for them that's like that now? Everything is, like, hardcover, and
Yeah.
it's just like, are they missing out on the joys of, like, little paperback novels?
I know, I wonder that too because, I have a 7-year-old boy and, he is really into Captain Underpants, which is such a different vibe.
Yeah.
So I'm, so out of touch with, what is today's American Girl book, I don't know.
So tell me your romance origin story. How did you get into romance reading, and how did the writing happen?
Okay, oh, this is fun. When I was little, like I said, I would read anything, and my mom was a romance reader, and I would always steal her romance novels when she wasn't looking, although I'm sure she knew I was doing it, and read those, whatever she had around. I don't even know, I can't even remember. any of the authors. I know she had a lot of Nora Roberts, but other than that, I don't even know what books they were. And I always really gravitated toward love stories. When I got older, like I would read the classics like Pride and Prejudice, but I was also really into the Princess Diaries books by Meg Cabot. Those were like that love story between Mia and Michael was definitely like my romance origin story because I loved reading
Mm.
that. And I loved how funny she was and how it was so romantic. And then I went to college for creative writing and I kind of focused on more literary writing just because that's what we did there.
What you
And I
do in
also
college, yeah.
yeah, it is, and that's I mean, I also like reading that, but everything I wrote was more focused on being funny, and eventually, like, it took me a lot of years after college to kind of realize where my voice was steering me and that it was steering me towards
Yeah.
writing something that was more commercial, and I'd always liked reading romance, but I would say the time I got, like, really into it was when my son was born because he did not sleep unless I was holding him, so I was up all night, every night, and, like, there was nothing I could do, I was just holding a baby, and I couldn't read anything that was too upsetting because it was like I was sleep deprived and going crazy, so I started reading a ton of romance novels, and then eventually I was kind of like, "Why don't I direct my writing in this area?" Because I'd been writing YA up until then, and that was when I decided to kind of write my own adult romance.
We have to go back to Waiting for Tom Hanks.
Mhm.
That book took I feel like it took the romance world by storm. Everybody was going crazy. I remember loving the cover. I remember chatting with girlfriends about it. Did you how do you, when you look back on at that time, like how does it feel looking back on like that moment in romance reader world and like I
Mhm.
just it was something really special and I think for girls like me that love rom-coms and just it was doing something really special. But for you looking back on it now like there's time distance, between when it came out and now. How does it feel looking back on it?
Oh, it was such an exciting time. I mean, that before that, I'd written 2 young adult novels. So this was my first adult book, and it was kind of just serendipitously, it was really good timing when I wrote it because, that whole trade paperback rom-com boom had kind of just started, like, Jasmine Guillory's first book had just come out, and so we were really just getting into that illustrated cover thing, which is just really the vibe of Waiting for Tom Hanks. Like, it is not a sexy romance novel, it is like a '90s rom-com movie.
Yeah.
So, the fact that this trend was kind of happening as soon as I had the book out on submission, it just worked out really well in my favor, and it was just such a fun book to write and a fun book to talk about because everyone loves talking about romantic comedies. So, that whole experience of publishing that book was just like a really exciting and super fun time.
When going a little bit, like, even further back, had this been, like, a concept you had been stewing on? Like, what was the journey, like, to becoming published
Mhm.
with Berkeley and putting out these romantic comedies?
Yeah, well, like I said, up until then, I'd written 2 young adult novels, and I was
Mhm.
kind of trying to figure out what to do next, and I had this newborn baby, so I was just kind of sitting around thinking about writing a lot more than I was actually writing, and, I had the idea for the title for Waiting for Tom Hanks first, because I had done this project the year before where I'd watched it was called A Year of Rom-Coms, and I'd watched a
Okay.
romantic comedy every week for a year, and it was, like back then I had it on a Tumblr, and that was super fun. So I'd been thinking about rom-coms pretty much nonstop for a year and thinking about the tropes and like the things that showed up over and over again. And I started thinking like, what if there was a woman who is obsessed with romantic comedies the way that I am, but in a way that's ruining her life? And that's how the title Waiting for Tom Hanks came into my head because he is, the hero in several rom-coms and kind of like the ideal man in those movies. And, what if somebody was just like waiting around and keeping their life on hold, waiting for someone like Tom Hanks to show up? And I knew right away that it had to be an adult book and not a young adult book because teenagers do not care about Tom Hanks. Like they don't know
Sadly,
who he
sadly
is.
enough.
Like once I did a book festival, like after that book had been announced and we were talking about it, and literally none of the kids there knew who he was. So I was like, yeah, it can't be a young adult book. And Berkeley was always kind of my dream publisher just because,
Yeah.
Jasmine Guillory's book had just come out and I loved what they did with that. And so when Berkeley wanted my book and, it was just, like, so exciting. It really felt like it all worked out perfectly.
Okay, you have to tell me more about this rom-com project. So how did
Yeah.
the idea come about, and, like, what did you learn about yourself as you're doing it? Like, did you
Yeah,
at the end of it, did you come out with, like, a definitive favorite, or is that too hard to answer?
oh, no. Okay, so I started that project because, like, I love to give myself homework, and at the time, I was writing my young adult books, and writing a book is kind of a lonely process. It's
Mhm.
just you and your computer, and you're not getting feedback, and I used to be a blogger, and I'd write about books for websites. So I was kind of craving that, like, immediate publication, talking to people. So I thought I would start this, and I'd always loved rom-coms, so it was not an arduous undertaking. I knew it would be fun. So with each week, I would, like, write about the movie and whether or not I liked it or not, and then also make a list of all the tropes that had showed up in that movie, which was really fun and funny to see, like, what tropes would show up over and over again, and whether or not the movie was, like, romantic, like, did it make me believe in love, and would I ever watch it again? And I would say over the course of the year, I definitely had some favorites. It showed me how much better Nora Ephron's movies are than a lot of other rom-coms.
Yeah.
Kind of depressing because, she is no longer with us and not making movies anymore. So that was kind of a bummer because hers are, like, head and shoulders above everything else. But
Yeah.
it also kind of showed me that I enjoy watching even a not very good rom-com. I kind of like them all the time.
Yeah, I feel like, because I watch a lot of made-for-TV movies,
Uh,
and sometimes I feel like I hate to say this, but, like, sometimes the more, like, cheaper looking made ones are so charming.
Mhm. Yeah, I know sometimes and that's something else I found out in the project is sometimes things like budgets don't matter as much as whether or not everyone working on the movie really believes in it. Like, you
Yes.
can if the people making the movie don't really care and they aren't putting their all into making a good rom-com, whereas if the people making it believe in it and there's chemistry between the actors, that can kind of overcome everything.
What do you think that, like, Nora Ephron did that just set her apart from everybody else?
Well, 2 things. One is that she was actually very funny. Like, a lot of times you'll watch a rom-com or read a rom-com, and there's not a lot of comedy in it.
Mhm.
And, her books have such good dialogue and her movies have such good dialogue, and they're so funny. But also, I think the main thing she did that sets her apart is she understood that romantic comedies can and should have some sadness in them.
Yeah.
They are not just light and fluffy, like, they have that happily ever after, but it means so much more because the characters have actually been through something, like, in You've Got Mail, like, something actually bad happens, which is Tom Hanks closes Meg Ryan's bookstore, like, that's an actually bad thing, and
Yeah.
she's sad because she lost her mother when she was younger, and none of those problems are fixed by the end, so it feels a little bit more realistic, and that happy ending of them being together feels a little bit more hard won, so it feels more satisfying.
Yeah, like, in Sleepless in Seattle, his wife has passed away, right? So, it's
Mhm.
just I don't know, it's like this beautiful story of grief, and by the time they get together and you're in the end, you're
Yeah.
like and that scene where, like, he talks about how his wife could cut an apple in one slice, and then Meg Ryan does the same thing. It's like, oh, it's so deserving in the end. It's like, it's so sad, but it's
Yeah.
also so funny at the same time. I think you're totally right. Tell us your okay, we're here to talk faking Christmas, which
Mhm.
I was recently listening. I feel like okay, I feel like I hear a lot of either fellow podcasters, bloggers, they struggle with the idea of like books being marketed as romantic comedies. But then you read something like Faking Christmas, and I died laughing. Like, I teach sixth grade and we do independent reading every morning at the beginning of every class. Like, I teach English. And, like,
Mhm.
my students are like, "What is she back there laughing at?"
Oh, I
And
love that. That's like the
and
highest compliment.
yeah, and so, like, I give them little writing prompts after they read, and I'm like, "I want you to come up with a question," and I always give them example, and I'm like, "In my story, Laurel hates this guy Gilbert, who I know she's gonna fall in love with." I was like, "She overheard something, and I need to know what she overheard." And they're like, "Oh, okay, that's what she means by" like, and so I was able to, like, use it as an example,
Oh,
but
I love that.
give us, like okay, give us your pitch, like, what is the book about for anyone who hasn't read it yet?
Okay, so Faking Christmas is kind of based on inspired by the 1945 movie Christmas in Connecticut.
Mhm.
And it is about a woman named Laurel who kind of not on purpose lies during her job interview, but lets her new boss at the magazine slash website she works for think that she owns a farm, which sounds a little bit unbelievable, but the book itself is a little bit unbelievable. It's a little bit over the top. And everything is going good until her boss.
Max. I said
Yeah.
Gilbert, and Gilbert's the boss.
Oh,
Max is the love interest. Yes. Keep going,
okay, that's
sorry.
right. So everything's going good until Gilbert, his wife, leaves him right before Christmas, and he invites himself over to Laurel's farm. The problem is that she does not have a farm. She lives in the city, and she doesn't know how to cook. She doesn't know how to do anything she's made him think she knows how to do. Her twin sister, Holly, is the one who knows how to do all that stuff. So she and Holly come up with a plan where Laurel will pretend to have Holly's farm and her children and her goats, and Gilbert will come over and no one will be the wiser. But when Laurel gets to Holly's house, Holly is like, well, you have to pretend to be married to my husband's best friend, Max, who is already Laurel's nemesis because she overheard him saying something at Holly's wedding. And also, she just doesn't like him. And as the weekend goes on, she comes up with more reasons not to like him, like that he does not enjoy Christmas and makes fun of everything that she likes. But they get snowed in together. And of course, it is a romance. So she does start to realize that maybe there's more to Max than she thought initially.
So I watched Christmas in Connecticut for the first time a couple of years ago, and it is hilarious. And so I
Mhm.
love hearing you say that it's like loosely inspired by that because when I first, like within the first couple chapters, I was like, is this inspired by Christmas in Connecticut? I think it's
Yeah.
so brilliant. Like this girl has been like charading her life basically. And then she finds herself in a situation where it's like, oh, now I need this to be real. So like
Mm.
had you like because I know you now it makes sense you did this whole rom-com project. When did the seeds for this story kind of get planted for you?
Well, I guess I watched Christmas in Connecticut maybe like 4 or 5 years ago for the first time, and I loved it so much. And I was making my husband watch it with me again. And afterwards, I was talking to him about it, and I said, I don't know why someone hasn't made a version of this with social media. Like, that feels
Yeah.
like it would be such an easy topic and so realistic because so many people lie on social media anyway. And we know that.
Yeah.
And then I was like, wait a second, I'm a writer. I could write that. Like, that's my job. And obviously you've read the book and you've seen the movie. So a lot of things are not similar to the
No,
movie
but
that
I think
originally.
it's so brilliant because when I watched it, I thought the same thing. I
Mhm,
think of that as like Sleepless in Seattle too. I mean, if you're ever
mhm.
bored with writing, I always wonder like how would this work in today's world? And with Christmas in Connecticut, it's like I feel like that movie is so ahead of its time in a way. I think it was just like bred to be redone because now we do have Instagram and TikTok and blogs and all of the things. I just think it's so brilliant that you did that.
It was so fun. It was really fun to do because
Yeah.
it is such a good idea. And then, like, obviously I didn't wanna just rewrite the movie, so it was fun to think of ways that I could make it different
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. I love that. One of my favorite quotes, and I'm paraphrasing, is early on in the book. Okay, we learn pretty quickly that Laurel, she says something about basically like in your 20s, it's okay to be a hot mess, but in your 30s, people start to worry about you. So, like, how did like writing Laurel? Can you talk about writing her?
Mhm. Yeah. So basically, when I was coming up with her character, I knew I needed her to be the opposite of someone who would like own a farm and have children and have goats and know how to bake a pie. So it was really fun to think of someone who doesn't necessarily have their life together and think of like what could happen to make her hit rock bottom so that she would let this lie go uncorrected during a job interview
Mhm.
because, most people right away would be like, "No, I don't actually own a farm. That's my sister. I just manage the social media." But it was fun to think of what could happen to Laurel that would make her be like, "No, I have to go along with this because I need this job." More so for her sense of herself as a person who's got it together even than, like, getting the job.
Yeah.
But she was very fun to write. Like, I like writing people who are a little bit messy just because it can often be so funny, and honestly, like, all of us are a little bit messy in real life anyway.
Yeah. I mean, and it was like there was a real moment too in the, like, interview scene when she's kind of recapping it. I think Gilbert, like, I think it's like the health insurance, and I was like, if she lives in
Mhm.
America, that's definitely something all of us
Yes.
may do a little white lie to make sure that we get the job for, because
Uh-huh,
it's really
totally.
important, yeah, so, okay, with Max, the scene that he won me over, and okay, I just feel like this is the moment where things switched, and I don't know if this was deliberate or what on your part, but they're at the dinner table and Gilbert asks the quintessential "How did you guys meet?" story, and at this point, we're full on fake marriage, all of that, which I love that trope so much, and Max tells this story. He's like, "Do you want me to tell it, honey?" And she's like, "Sure," because she has no idea. She didn't think that far, and you can just tell, like, I'm, like, following along with the audiobook, listening to him, and, you could just tell, like, it was not fake for him, but Laurel doesn't get it. So, like, talk about writing Max, because he's so misunderstood by Laurel.
Yeah, like, I feel like Max was hard because it is a hard, tricky balance to have when you have enemies to lovers, because you need that person like, you need to understand why they don't like each other, but they can't be so terrible that the reader's not going to be on board when they fall in love, and I feel like one of the things that makes it so much easier is if the guy has secretly been in love with her the whole time. So
Yeah.
it's like
Yes.
making it so Max, like, always loved her, you're like, "Okay, well, he's not actually a bad person. He is just having a very hard time showing how he feels, and now he's getting better at it, but back then at the wedding, he was not." But that was fun, and it was a challenge, like, we had my editor had to help me a lot, like, go back and be like, "Here, let's add a scene where he's, like, interacting with their family. Let's add a scene where he's nice to them." Because I love writing, like, snappy enemies to lovers banter, but if there's
Mhm.
too much of that, then it can kind of turn the reader off. So I don't know, it was a hard balance.
Yeah, it's like it's never like Laurel is mean. You
Mhm.
know that she overheard something and that has made her highly dislike Max,
Yeah.
and it feels mutual for a little bit, but then you slowly, like, I feel like, loosen the reins a little bit, and you're quickly like, "Oh, no, you don't really know if he, like, likes her at first, but you're like, "He doesn't hate her like she is trying to hate him." But then when he does that scene, I'm like, "Oh, he is in love," because he even says it, like, it's basically his mission to, like, love her one day, and I'm like, "Oh my
Mhm.
god, Laurel." But she
Yeah.
is just I think what is so brilliant about her is, like, she loves her sister, and whatever he says has something to do with her sister. And so I'm like, "Okay, I get that because I have a sister too, and I'd probably hate somebody if I overheard them say something bad about her." So you just really created, like, this juicy, steak-filled tension.
Good. Well, I'm glad that came across for you because it was definitely hard to do, but yeah, like I wanted to show, like you said, that Laurel will do anything to defend her sister, and even she even feels a little bit disloyal when she starts to like Max because she's like, "This guy is terrible. How can I like him?" But
Yeah,
that's kind of the tension of a romance.
yeah. So did you have a favorite, scene that you wrote?
Oh, I would say one of my favorites is when they have an almost kiss,
Mhm.
under the Christmas tree, because that was, like, one of the most screwball comedy type scenes where, like, everything went wrong, and that was super fun to write, and, like, I've always loved scenes where people almost kiss in a rom-com, those are always my favorites, and, like, someone, like, bursts in and interrupts them, so that was really fun, and I always loved including Gilbert in the scene to the point that I included him too much, and we had to take him out of some scenes because my editor was like, "There's too much Gilbert, he does not need to be around in every romantic scene," and I was like, "I guess you're probably right."
But your
It
heart is
was
so
fun.
broken for Gilbert, he's so heartbroken.
I know, it was fun to write someone who was like he was usually the comic relief, like, he also showed that Laura was a good person, but he was usually just a comic relief, and he was fun to write.
Writing Christmas, I think sometimes we get these books that you go into it hoping it's Christmassy, and, I mean, obviously, the focus is still on the romance, but I love that. For one, it's set in Ohio. I'm from the Midwest too. I'm originally from Missouri, so I'm like, I know it gets cold.
Oh,
We do get snow. Um,
mhm.
but so, like, there's a blizzard involved, which leads to Gilbert having to stay a little bit longer than planned. And then just like oh my gosh, the big Christmas cookie like playlist that she mentions for them to bake. And then like Max would read stories to her niece and nephew. Like you found little subtle ways, I think, to remind us that it's Christmassy. How did you balance the Christmas with the romance?
Well, when I decided I wanted to write a Christmas book, which I've never done before, I really just thought, well, I'm going to go all in. I want this book to be like a very Christmassy escape from real life where like everything is Christmassy. And it helped that I was setting it at Holly's farmhouse. And
Hmm.
she is like someone who's very good at decorating a home. So everything was like over the top decorated. And um it was just really fun to write that stuff. Like, I enjoy Christmas too. I'm a Christmas person. It's fun. I have a kid, so you kinda have to be a Christmas person when you have a little kid.
Yeah.
But it was fun to just, like, get into the spirit, even though it was weird because I was writing it in the summer, so that part was hard. I had to, like, light a Christmas candle, and I would listen to a Christmas playlist even though it was July
Oh my gosh.
and hot
Christmas in
outside.
July, Carrie. Christmas in July.
I was living Christmas in July and Christmas year round.
Yeah.
It was all the time. But yeah, like, I just wanted to include as much, like, over the top Christmas stuff as possible because I love a Christmas movie, and I wanted the book to have that feeling.
Yeah. Oh gosh, it definitely did. Well, I loved it. Are you working on anything now that you're able to talk about?
I can't say too much yet, but what I'm working on will also be set in Ohio. Like,
Okay.
so big surprise, like my other books.
Love it. No, my best friend's from Youngstown, Ohio. So even though I feel like I've only driven through Ohio, I have a lot of Ohio love. 'Cause-
That's good, I love it.
So, like, what is your romance reading and era? Like, I know you'll read whatever Emily Henry every new release she
Mhm.
puts out, but like your romance reading era right now, what is it?
Oh, that's good. I would say I just did an event with Tessa Bailey last week. So I'm kind of
Mhm.
like in my Tessa Bailey era right
Oh,
now.
love
Like
that.
I already love her, but like just seeing her at the event and she was so funny and so smart. And now I'm like, I want to read everything she's written. So like I bought some of her books at the event and I went and checked a bunch out at the library. So
That's a good era to be in. That's a
yeah.
good era. Um, in defense of the romantic comedy on page, like, why would you say these books matter?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say, I mean, for the same reason all romance matters, whether it's a book or a movie, it is so nice, especially right now, to have something with a guaranteed happily ever after and something that you know will make you laugh. Life is obviously really hard for a lot of people, and I've spoken to a lot of readers who say they read my book for an escape, and that means a lot to me because I would with this book especially, I wanted to write something that was not upsetting at all because I do read a lot of books that make me cry. We talked about how much I love crying, but it is so nice to be able to read something where you know everything is going to work out and things aren't going to get too heavy.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you for chatting with me today. Can you share with everyone where we can keep up with you online?
Yes, the best place is probably on Instagram, which is just my name, Kerry Winfrey.
You have a very fun Instagram. I second that.
Oh,
Everybody go
thank
follow Carrie on Instagram.
you.
And you can see
Thank
the
you.
picture of her and Tessa Bailey.
Yes, you can.